If you've listened to this show before, you've heard the moment that BB Nate asked Rian Johnson a question that changed Star Wars canon forever. But that one moment is only a fraction of the story. This week, BB Nate and Samuel the Hutt join me to look at all of the amazing twists and turns in what we like to call the legend of Terbus the Porg. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the Porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Terbus?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Terbus? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that Porg's name is now Terbus. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody listen to it.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast to name an official Star Wars creature and be endorsed by the writer-director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story written on our souls and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why this episode in our interview series feels very special, as I'm interviewing Nate and Sam about the legend of Terbus the Porg. If you've been following our show for a while now, you know the basics of the story. We get invited to Imax headquarters to watch The Last Jedi, followed with a Q&A by Rian Johnson. BB Nate works up the nerve to ask Rian about the name of the Porg on the Millennium Falcon, and then Rian turns the question around on him. Nate answers with Terbus, and almost 2 years later, Terbus is an official Star Wars comic book series character. But there are so many more moments and challenges and highs and lows that you've probably never heard about. In the immortal words of Lando Calrissian, buckle up, baby. But before we start telling the legend, I asked Nate and Sam kind of what goes through their minds now when they think back on everything that's happened since we entered IMAX headquarters on January 31st, 2018. Here's what they said.
Honestly, it's just been crazy all over with the podcast, with our life. We've constantly just been going and going, but it's just we've had a lot of fantastic opportunities that have come from that, and just stuff we never thought would be able to be possible just come from that moment on. So it's been crazy.
Yeah, I mean, with that moment and the podcast in general, it's provided some amazing opportunities, things that you can never dream about being able to do. So it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Now, the story really kind of begins all the way back at Star Wars Celebration 2017 in Orlando, when a top Star Wars podcast made you, Sam, an offer to be a guest on an upcoming episode of their show. Go back and explain that part of the story, Sam.
Yeah, so it was Celebration, and you and Nathan had gone, I think it was to get pizza or something like that.
Food or something.
You know, because you're in line for hours and hours.
Not anymore.
And so I'm standing there in the queue, and fortunately I'm on towards the end of one of the walkways. And there's this guy in a Blue Jays hat going around just interviewing random people in line. And I think he was actually interviewing one of the people like standing next to me. But eventually, we started talking and stuff. And he was like, "You're really well spoken," which I think probably meant that I talked too much at the time.
But this is hilarious because I don't know if we've ever told this on the show before, but you were 13 months old. This is when we were living in Daphne, Alabama the first time. We were at the McDonald's on Highway 98. You guys know what I'm talking about now?
Oh, yeah.
We're sitting in there and we're eating McDonald's. I guess you were eating some French fries. Maybe you were a little bit older than 13 months, but it wasn't much older than that. You were still really, really little. And we're sitting there doing our thing, Christy and me and you. And all of a sudden we get ready to leave. And there's this older lady that's sitting in the booth behind us. And she asks how old, you are. And we tell her, and she's like, that's amazing. He's extremely verbal at this point.
Right.
So that was, this is the exact same thing that happened with Dominic Jones from Star Wars Underworld.
Right.
So.
But he was like, well, I want you to stop by the booth later. And we'll get in contact. We're thinking about doing an episode interviewing people who's this been their first experience at Celebration and asking them what they thought. And I'm like, oh, that'd be great. And then I completely forgot about it, actually. But we were walking through the show floor, and eventually I stumbled upon their booth and remembered it. And he remembered me, and he's like, hey, let me get your email. I'll send me an email later, and we'll get in contact, right? And so we exchanged emails. We went to the hotel later that night, and I wrote him an email, sent it off, and then went to bed, and never heard back.
He totally ghosted.
We still have not heard back.
No, that's not about that. Yeah, but we've that's hilarious. There's that part of the story will come back a little bit later in this. How did that make you feel about this whole thing?
Oh, I mean, it was kind of like, I was a little upset. I'm like, wow, that was kind of rude, but okay, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I was excited, to be able to share my thoughts. So.
And we were excited to do all that. But frankly, for me as a dad, you getting ghosted by the Star Wars Underworld, which we love those guys. And again, we're going to talk about that part of the story a little bit more later as well. But in a lot of ways, it's what got us kind of started on this journey. First with a really, really bad attempt at a YouTube channel where we would source
I wish we had those videos.
No, I really am glad that they
just
do
to
not
look back on them.
Anymore.
We sourced most of our videos, content from our videos from Mike Zero because we didn't have any clue. We didn't know.
No, we
didn't.
didn't.
Time. It's like we were just like, oh, there's this amazing YouTuber that's got lots of views. He must be accurate. And little did we know that he was maybe he's a satirical show and we just don't know it. Maybe he's just
so good at satire.
Yeah.
You can't even tell.
Who knows? Anyway, we decided after we realized that our YouTube show was terrible, but we still wanted to do something, that we would launch a podcast ourselves. And so we got that up and going. We were barely 2 months into the podcast. We launched it like the beginning of December 2017, right before The Last Jedi came out. We had, just gotten this thing started when an amazing opportunity came to us, kind of an offer you can't refuse.
You're not going to say it like,
we're going to make you an offer. I can't do it. I'm not.
Come on.
Like Grandpa Great.
I can't.
Grandpa Great.
From VeggieTales. Anyway, we got an offer we couldn't refuse on that. Nate, explain kind of how did we get invited to The Last Jedi viewing at IMAX headquarters? We were living in California.
Yeah,
at the time.
we started to hear about this going around kind of in the pipeline that this was a thing happening. And so we had our little small slice, our little community band together to basically make it happen for us to be able to go to that because we really did want to. And it was just kind of a lot of waiting, a lot of let's hope this happens. And eventually one day we got an email from IMAX letting us know that we're invited and we can bring a +1. So,
oh yeah, that was a heartbreaking email in some ways because it was super exciting. Obviously,
super exciting.
But then for me as the dad, my heart kind of sunk when I read the email
because
that it was
obviously you would have to go.
Yes, Dad would have to.
Yeah, you were barely 16 years old. You weren't driving to Hollywood from Marietta, an hour and a half south of that. You weren't doing that, and BB Nate's not going by himself. So, or the two of you guys sure as heck aren't going by yourselves,
especially in LA.
So we had to figure that all out. But Sam, before we kind of walk through that part of the story, which was super cool, explain kind of our view on The Last Jedi and why we were so excited about going to IMAX headquarters to see The Last Jedi. And we, you didn't really kind of explain that part, but they were inviting us to see a screening of The Last Jedi with a Q&A following with Rian Johnson, the writer and director of this. This was a huge deal for us, more than just because it was Star Wars, but because we loved The Last Jedi so much.
I mean, we had seen it, what was it, 9 or 10 times?
I think you'd seen it 10 times, and the two of us had seen it 9 times at that point.
In theaters before even this premiere.
This came out about a month and a half before this screening.
Right.
That's a lot.
We would literally walk out. I mean, we saw that movie so many times because we loved it. I mean, we still love it. I mean, I have it memorized the back of my hand at this point, but we love The Last Jedi. So having an opportunity to not only see it again in the IMAX headquarters, but possibly me, or at least just, be in the room with the writer director of this film we love so much was, again, an offer you can't refuse. I mean, that's such a once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah. And what you were saying, BB Nate, about we had this tiny little band. We had maybe 100 people that were following us on Twitter at the time. It was small, but it seemed like every single one of them, every single day, were tweeting to IMAX and to Collider, who were putting this together, basically saying, get these guys a chance to see this. They love The Last Jedi so much. They're right there close. Give them the opportunity to see it. And so I guess about 1,500 people applied, from what I understand. This was they were opening up 75 slots because it was 150 people max, and every one of those slots was a +1.
Right.
So 150 people total, and amazingly, we got an invite to go to the IMAX headquarters to watch this. And like I said, it was or like you mentioned, BB Nate, it was a +1 type situation. So Sam, about 3 days before we were supposed to go, we got the email about a week before it happened.
Right.
About 3 days, we were debating how we were going to do this. Which one of the two of you were going to go?
No, I wanted Sammy to go.
You both kind of were like doing that thing where you were waiting for the other person to go. So late one night, Christy and I were in our bed. You came in the room, Sam, and what did you say to us?
Oh, I mean, I was just like, I think Nate should go. I mean, I don't remember my reasoning at the time, but I knew Nate really liked it, and especially like the animals and the droids and all of that. So I figured, yeah, he should go. I mean, he's the cute one of the group, so everybody likes him. So he should go. Yeah.
So it was like 3 days later, the morning of, we decide, I go to work and work a half day, and then we're going to drive around. We're going to go grab lunch at the mall and then drive to Hollywood and get in line. The two of us, BB Nate, we're going to get in line and wait because it was first come, first serve on which seats you got. And we had heard rumors that there may be 2 theaters that were being used, and we wanted to make sure we got it in the main theater. So we got there pretty early, was the plan.
Really early.
We were planning on getting there really early. And right at the last minute, based on your mom's encouragement and prompting, BB Nate, what did we decide to do with him?
We decided to take Sammy along with us, just to have him there, and maybe have the possibility of him getting in with using somebody else's +1 if they didn't have one. But basically for him to just be there and cross our fingers and hope that he could get in.
We took a separate car.
Yeah, explain kind of what's going on, because you couldn't just sit outside in Hollywood by yourself.
Right, yeah. So you two went in your Mustang, and Mom took me in the green car, and we were going to hang out with y'all until you had to go in. And if I got in, great. If not, I'd ride back with Mom. But she stayed with us in line the whole time too. And we were used to lines at this point because celebration. We at this point we realized, okay, lines are a part of Star Wars, so we were fine waiting in line for a while. But that was kind of our plan, our game plan with that.
So then tell them kind of what happened.
So not long before it was time to go in, Mom was, she was determined to find a way to get me in, because she was just about as bummed for me as anyone. Probably more bummed than I was, but she was looking around and she saw this one lady further up in the line who seemed to just be alone. Wasn't really talking with anyone, just kind of on her phone. So Mom went up and was like, "Hey, do you have like your +1 or anything?" And the lady was like, "No, they canceled on me last minute. So I just decided I would go by myself." And Mom was like, "Well, my son is here. His brother and dad got in. Can he be your +1?" She's like, "Yeah, sure. No problem." It was literally no skin off of her nose to do that. So I went in with her, and you guys followed shortly after. And we actually ended up all 3 getting to go as a result of that, which was very exciting for us. It wouldn't have felt right for it just to be like 2 of us. I mean, it would have been great that y'all got to do it, but
the podcast is a podcast. We do all 3 of us, and we wanted all 3 of us to be able to participate in this. I want to back up to before we left to head on up there. We actually went to the mall, to eat at the food court because it had all the different kinds of foods we liked, and we weren't that far from the mall. So we decided to go to the mall and grab lunch beforehand. And while we were there, we stopped in at GameStop. Do you guys? And what did we find at GameStop and decide to do?
A little Porg kind of suction cup thing that'll go on in your car on a window, and then a Porg on board bumper sticker, and we found that, and we immediately decided to get it because we love the Porgs from The Last Jedi, and we stuck that up on the green Kia that day, and funny enough, and it's still there.
Yeah, been up there since that day.
The Porg on board sign went from a bright yellow to a very faded gray at this point. Now, I didn't really at the time when we got in there, we're sitting there, we watched the movie and all this kind of stuff. I didn't at that time have the foggiest idea about this. But the two of you had already thought through your question. BB Nate, you thought about kind of what would happen if you asked your question about this. Sam, the name Terbus was already decided upon before we walked in there, right?
Yeah. So how it happened was, I think it was about the night before. We were both thinking of questions we could ask, and Nathan came up with his real fast. He was like, what's the name of the Porg on the Millennium Falcon, right? He wanted to know because a lot of times behind the scenes on sets, they'll have little crew names for the creatures, and Nathan wanted to know if the Porg that was flying around the Millennium Falcon had like a little name that they would use on set. So that was Nathan's question. He came up with it quick. I never came up with a question. I wasn't clever enough to do so. But I was like, well, Nate, what if it doesn't have a name? And like, what if he asks you? I mean, just like in the 1 in a million chance, right? I'm like, well, what if he wants to know what we would name it, right? And so we both sat there brainstorming for a bit and trying to come up with names. And I look over at Buster and I'm like, oh, what if we took his name and did it backwards? I'm like, Rusted? Yeah, that's not a good name in anything.
That's a terrible name.
That's a really bad name. So he kept thinking a little bit more, and I'm like, well, what if we just took the syllables of Buster and swapped them, right? So it became Terbus. And we're both like, that's really good. That's good. Let's go with that. So we're like, well, either we'll get an answer of what the Porg is, or we'll get to, share our little idea. And that was it. And that was what we had planned if we were going to ask a question at all. And that was it.
That's funny. Now, BB Nate, there's an idea within Star Wars. It's a naming convention. It's like not convention like Comic-Con, but like an idea, a concept, right? A naming convention in Star Wars called Tuckerization, where they have, and it's happened since the original Star Wars film all the way through, where they actually literally, the idea is taking names and flipping syllables in them. Did you guys know anything about that idea?
Not at all.
Tuckerization when you did this?
Not at all. We just thought about it and just was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Sounds Star Wars-y. Probably because it was used in Star Wars a lot. So it probably really worked and it just felt right. So that's really what it is.
It blows my mind that you guys had gone through all of those scenarios in your head before we even got to Hollywood that night. Because when you watch the video or you hear it at the beginning of our show when it's played, it feels very spontaneous, like you came up with that. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But the other thing that I think is hilarious, we talk about how Terbus is the Tuckerization of the name of our dog, Buster, which is hilarious too, because that's a very Lucasfilm thing. The name Indiana Jones is Indiana takes the name Indiana from the name of their dog. Yeah. His name is Henry. He doesn't want to be called that, so he calls himself after their dog. So all of those things kind of fit perfectly into Star Wars. Again, I didn't know any of this had been discussed. So when that Q&A with Rian Johnson is opened up, he comes in, they bring everybody from the other theater, all 50 people that were in the other theater, they bring them in, everybody's violating code fire marshal codes.
That's true. Everybody was sitting on the stairs.
Sitting on stairs and in aisles and stuff like that. Who cares, right?
No, nobody cares.
But we're all sitting there, and the question and answer session with Rian Johnson opens up. I didn't know you guys had a question planned or had thought about it or anything. You hadn't told me this. So me being sort of there's a part of me that, as introverted as I am, I think like a marketer, a promoter. There's a P.T. Barnum element to me. And so I'm like...
There is such a P.T. Barnum element to you.
So I throw my hand in the air as soon as it happens. Right. And they call on me right away. And I ask the dumbest question that's asked pretty much all night. It's whether or not Chewbacca actually ate the Porg on Octu. And, Ryan is a pro and everybody kind of giggles and laughs, and he laughs it off, and he handles it really well. And he says I don't remember exactly how he says it, but it's kind of like, look at me, a big smile on my face. No, he only cooked in. He didn't eat it. He only cooked the porg, and that was that was I thought our Tatooine Sons moment. Right. We got to ask that question.
Our 20 seconds of fame.
20 seconds of fame. That was as good as it's going to get, and we're done with it. And it's not too long after that that I look over at you, BB Nate, and you are visibly upset.
I was, yeah.
What was going on with you in that moment?
I am way more introverted than you are. Always have been. I don't have a
even
PT.
more so back then.
I don't have a PT Barnum element to me. So I really did want to ask this question because I felt like I'm not going to have another chance to do that. But I just did not have any of the courage or confidence to just raise my hand at all. Like, there were points when I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to raise my hand. And then I try, I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't think I will. And so they were just like a constant battle. I don't remember any of the questions that were asked because I was just such like internal turmoil the entire time.
Did you know this? Did you see this going on in him, Sam?
No, I was too enthralled in the conversation.
I was just
great
like,
big brother.
I was looking at the camera, recording Rian Johnson mostly, and I was just like, "This is crazy." I was just shocked to be there in the first place. I was just happy that we got to see the movie in IMAX headquarters. Like, it really set in that we were in IMAX headquarters when I went to the restroom and walked past the original Indiana Jones poster right next to the restroom. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. This is a big deal because you don't see that everywhere. You don't see a whole wall of posters with the original Tron and E.T. and Indiana Jones and all these amazing movies that I grew up with right there. And it was just insane. And so I'm just like, this is a little too big for me. So I was just really nervous, I guess is a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And I look over and I see you've got like tears coming in your eyes.
And I was just frustrated. I was frustrated, nervous, embarrassed in ways because I was crying, but I was frustrated that I was crying.
So you're getting angry at yourself for that.
And
I'm a great dad.
You're fantastic,
Dad of the year moment.
Dad of the year moment right here.
I look over at him and I whisper, and I don't even think about the fact that Rian Johnson is sitting like 10 feet in front of me right there looking at everything that's going on. I look over at you, BB Nate, and I'm like, what are you crying about? I'm whispering this, right? You can't really whisper on a podcast or you can't hear anything that's being said, but I'm like, what are you crying about? And you tell me, you want to ask a question, but you're too scared. And so in classic, Bill Cosby, dad, Theodore, Cliff Huxtable type moment, I'm like, oh, it's okay, BB Nate. I understand that that you're nervous about this, but I want you. No, that's not what I do. I'm like, Stop your crying. This is ridiculous. You got a once in a lifetime moment. Either you decide to ask your question or you stop crying, but don't ruin your whole evening and my evening. I'm like, I don't know if I said the last part about my evening, but I'm probably thinking it. But anyway, I was not encouraging at all, but I wasn't going to also let you ruin the night for yourself.
Oh, no.
Worrying about it. So it was kind of like either ask your question or suck it up and get over it that you're not going to ask the question and enjoy the rest of the night, right? So this is kind of what goes on for a while. The Q&A keeps going for like another 40, 45 minutes after this.
It was great.
And there were some great questions. You still remember?
I don't remember any of the questions.
And it's at this point that the host gives the 5-minute warning. He's explaining that it's the last chance to ask these questions
because they're planning on doing autographs and meeting greets and stuff afterwards. And it was already 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
it was 11:30. I think so.
Yeah, it was late,
really late.
And Ryan has committed. 150 people there. He's committed to meeting, shaking the hands of every single one of them, talking with them, taking pictures if that's what they want, signing autographs and all this other stuff. So he's got at least another hour and a half worth of stuff that we need to do. So the host is like, hey, we got 5 more minutes to ask questions. If you've got a question that you want to ask, I don't know if they saw the whole exchange between you and I, BB Nate, but it kind of feels like it looking back that maybe they were like, listen, if you've got a question you need to ask it now. Because that's what he says. And I look over at you, BB Nate, and the look on your face was absolutely priceless.
Yeah, I finally decided, okay, I'm going to ask my question. I firmly put myself in place because I'm like, so many other people ask their questions and there's literally no reason for me not to ask my question.
Now, you're 12 years old. You're a little kid.
I am. And Rian Johnson's sitting right there. Like, the director of my favorite Star Wars movie is sitting right there. And I'm 12 years old. But what was going through my head mostly was like, how do I even have the right to ask him a question? Because I am 12 years old. So he sends that last warning and I raise my hand. And now I wasn't like one of the 2 or 3 people to raise my hand at that point. No, like most of the theater rose their hand. And I'm like, you already called on the guy next to me.
Yeah, exactly.
So the likelihood of him calling on me was slim to none at all. And so I raised my hand and Sammy's over there looking shocked that I actually decided to finally raise my hand.
Because I was there with the whole exchange and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you were just shocked that I did it. And I raised my hand and Ryan immediately points to me. It's not even a thought in his mind that he was going to do it, which was already cool enough. He's a great guy, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. But he points at me and I get the mic from the guy, Stephen Weintraub, was I think.
Yeah, from Collider.
From Collider, which he had an exchange at the beginning of the night too. But I get the mic from him and I ask my question: what is the name of the Porg on Millennium Falcon? I was expecting, like a Greg or something,
Greg the Porg.
or some weird like the costume designer or the prop maker, the drink that they had that morning that they made. I was expecting something really strange.
Mocha latte.
Yeah, exactly. Something really weird. But he says he was thinking there for a little bit. And
yeah, you don't really hear it on the intro to the show when you guys listen to the show coming in, because I've cut just the segments of it. But there's like this like nervous giggle throughout the audience, and Ryan is kind of sitting there, and he's like, "The name of the Porg on the Millennium Falcon," and then Steven is sitting next to him. And he's like, "Oh yeah, the one in the nest," and he's like, "No, that's not it. That's not the one. I know the one he's talking about." Like that. So this all the exchange you don't hear at the intro.
No, you hear he was sitting there, and it was like an easy minute.
It feels like a minute. It wasn't nearly that.
It couldn't have been, but it felt a long time just because, I was just sitting there waiting for him to actually answer. And so he finally goes, "I don't know. What do you think his name is?" And I kind of at that point was like, he's just wondering, what I would name him if I could and that kind of stuff. And I'm like,
yeah, but he says, and then he says, and you guys do hear this on the intro. He says, "This is a big moment."
Yeah.
And I'm sitting
Honestly,
there. Hold on. As the dad who has just totally ripped his son, and been like, because his son was too scared to ask the question. My heart is beating out of my chest in panic that he is going to freeze in this moment, that he's going to start. I mean, honestly, if you're a 12-year-old and the writer director of the biggest Star Wars movie to come out in a long time is there and he's asking you this question, I would freeze in this moment. I could see myself crying in this moment as 12 years old. And you had already been pretty upset and emotional a minute ago. And I'm panicked inside thinking, oh my gosh, please God be with him. Please don't let him freeze. So
and I just say, I don't know, maybe Terbus? Wow, I had the
it sounds just like it, even though you've had a voice change.
Yeah, I even had the voice change. I had the same fluctuations. But I say that, and he goes, "Terbus. That is a good Star Wars name." And then he says Pablo Hidalgo, the head of Star Wars Story Group.
Well, he's not the head of it, but he's one of the leaders.
He's one of the heads, yes. There's not really a leader of the Star Wars group, but he makes decisions for canon, and he looks at the camera and says, "Pablo, if you're watching this live stream, that Porg's name is now Terbus." And so
that's a good Star Wars name.
Yeah. And the whole place erupts and applause everywhere. That the awkward giggles and stuff is just turned into applause and cheers and everything. And it was a lot of fun. It was really a moment that will forever be solidified in my mind, but also just feels like it went by in a snap, but also felt like eternity. It's hard to describe what it was like, because you're the first fan in Star Wars and the only fan by now to ever have named a character
in the new Disney
era like that. And it was just really crazy, and it was a lot of fun. And a bunch of people were like, hey, congratulations and all that stuff when they came up. And so we got out. We were like one of the last people out of the theater. And so the line is filled with hundreds of people.
Yeah, we're standing in line waiting to do the meet and greet with Rian Johnson.
Yeah.
With it, Sam kind of explained kind of what was going on during that time.
Yeah, I mean, we're standing there, hundreds and hundreds of people.
And not hundreds. There's 150 people in the entire thing.
Like a lot of people. I'm remembering it in my head, I guess. But there's a lot of people in front of us, and they're taking their time. And eventually, one of the theater, crew members comes up and is like, "Hey, Mr. Johnson, knows that there's some younger kids in this audience, and he wants to make sure that y'all can get home in time because it's already late." So he said, y'all are welcome to come up to the front of the line to meet him right now if you'd like. He's willing to do that, and we were all like, "Well, we don't really have anywhere to be. We're fine. We'll wait our turn and let other people go first." So we didn't actually take that offer. So we waited our turn, and we get up there, and
you got to also understand. You got to understand what I'm thinking when I'm like, "No, that's okay. We'll wait." Is I want to make sure that we have as much time with Ryan as possible because I want to be able to see if this is really going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I don't think y'all remember. It wasn't just one crew member that was sent to us. Another crew member was eventually sent to us and asked again if we wanted to go out. This was about 12:30 at this point when that other crew member came up to us. I'm like, "No, we're fine. We appreciate it." And then eventually Steven walked up to us.
That's true. Steven Weintraub from
He's
Collider.
like, "Ryan wants to see you. He understands it's late. He understands it's a school night. He wants to meet you guys and talk." And he's like, we can get you up to the front of the line. And he was
insisting.
Adamant. He was like, we're going to get you to the front of the line. We're like, "No, we're happy with where we're at. We're enjoying being with the people and just having a fun time." And he was like, "Okay." So we were just waiting.
It was late. It was really
we got
late.
out at like 1:30.
Yeah.
And we had an hour to drive to get back home. So it was late.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was also, there was no way we were going to fall asleep anytime soon because of everything that had happened. And I wanted to be able to have as much time with Ryan as possible. And so being at the end of the line was the choice that we were making on that. So we get up there to the end of the line.
Yeah, and he recognized us, obviously. I mean, he looked right at you when he asked the question. And I only remember really bits and pieces, but he was like, what was the name again? He's like, "What was that?" And we said Terbus, and he's like, "How do you spell that?" And I guess a fan had given him some big old graphic novel like compendium thing. And he just opened up to a random page and was like, Terbus. He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna email." Who did he say he was going to email?
I think he said he was going to email Pablo.
Yeah,
right. Somebody on Story
Pablo Hidalgo. Yeah,
and said he was gonna get that to us, and he was super excited. He spent some time with us and recorded a little spot for our podcast, and took pictures with us. I mean, he was super nice, great guy. It was a really, really cool exchange. Yeah,
he's one of the best people I've met from Hollywood. He spent so much time just talking with a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old. It's something you don't expect. And it wasn't like we were paying for a meet and greet or paying for a photo op. Nothing. He didn't have to do any of that. But he spent time with each and every fan, and especially us. Something you wouldn't expect from a director who just directed a Star Wars movie and was going on to direct another blockbuster hit of Knives Out. And so it's crazy.
If this was the end of the legend of Terbus the Porg, we would have been thrilled. We never expected this moment to have happened. We never in our wildest dreams could have predicted where it would go after this. But none of this could have been possible if BB Nate hadn't taken his shot when he got it. And so as a dad, I couldn't have been prouder that when I watched him overcome his fear and confidently ask his question. And then when he was ready with the name Terbus, I was absolutely blown away later when I found out about all that foresight that both he and Sam had to be ready for this moment. What an awesome lesson for all of us. It's been said that luck happens when opportunity meets preparation. Sam and Nate had prepared with the question, and they had thought through what could happen if they got the chance to ask it. And then, when the moment presented itself, Nate followed through, and we're lucky he did. I want to take just a minute to encourage you to check out our sponsor, cufflinks.com. If you're not familiar with cufflinks.com, all you need to know is that they have over 3,000 items, including cufflinks, ties, tie bars, and socks from all of the fandoms that you love, like Star Wars and Star Trek and Marvel and DC and Lord of the Rings and more. Again, we love cufflinks.com because they're family owned. They are run by a couple of brothers, and they geek out about Star Wars and all of these things as much as we do. If you want to help out the show and you want to look great doing it, head on over to cufflinks.com. Take a look at everything that they have to offer, and then if you decide it's time to get some of these amazing products, then use the code Tatooine15 at checkout. You'll receive 15% off on your entire order. And yes, they have some absolutely stunning Terbus the Porg cufflinks and ties if you're looking for that sort of thing. Now, all of that you've heard so far is only the beginning of the story. What happened next is the part that most people don't really know. We started using the hashtag Make Terbus Canon on social media. We had shirts and we had stickers made up with it. And for a few days after all of this happened, Rian Johnson was interacting with us on Twitter, and it seemed like this might actually gain some momentum. But then all of a sudden, Rian went silent. Stops interacting with everything we tweet. He stops.
I have a feeling he got stopped by someone doing it. Because that's not just something...
He doesn't have the right to do what he did.
What he did, he does not have the right to do whatsoever. What? Oh, it would suck if we were the ones that got his trilogy canceled. But he was... Yeah, he was definitely stopped by someone in Lucasfilm because
that's the assumption.
But we're kind of synonymous in Lucasfilm. We're
synonymous.
We're definitely known in Lucasfilm. Infamous is a good way.
Infamous is the right way. Yeah, specifically for this. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it did feel like something happened and he stopped interacting. And my gut, after a couple of weeks where he wasn't interacting anymore and he wasn't liking tweets and he wasn't responding to messages and anything like that, where I got the impression that someone at Lucasfilm said, buddy, you stepped in it with this one. You went too far. You went beyond the line of what you're allowed to do. And not that he got in big trouble, but it was kind of like you didn't really have the right to do that. There's more to this than making that happen. And that's the way it felt for me. And that's what but we still keep going. I still keep going, at least, with the Make Terbus Canon hashtag. And it's on all of the stuff that we put out on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. And
it was like the release of Snyder Cut movement, just not as big.
No, it wasn't even like it was. No, it's not even. No, it's not like that. It was a tiny little thing that we did. Very few other people even interacted with it. And that's kind of the way the story continues up until July, I think, of that year, when we were invited to a meetup of different Star Wars YouTubers and podcasters. It was outside of the San Diego Comic-Con that year. And in a lot of ways, this is kind of another surreal moment for us because we were just a tiny little show. We didn't have a massive following after this. And so we're there and we're with, some of the we gotta stop before we get into this next part. We're there and we'd been there maybe 15, 20 minutes and somebody walks in with a Toronto Blue Jays hat on. Samuel the Hutt, tell that part of the story.
Yeah. So Nate and I didn't really recognize him at first, but you knew exactly who it was.
Right. Cause I was still bitter.
Right.
You were.
And you were kind of like nudging us like, hey, that's the guy who stood you up on the podcast thing at Celebration. I'm like, no way, really. I mean, we were kind of a little bitter about it, but I
totally forgot it happened.
It would have been years.
I was like, what? You got ghosted by somebody from the podcast?
It had been a little over a year and a half, I guess. Yeah.
But we end up eventually.
I tell you to go talk to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And
again, Dad of the Year right here.
I don't remember exactly how it came up, but we got onto that topic. I'm like, well, we've met before or something like that. Or the podcast, started out of this as like, we had met at Celebration and you said I was going to be on your podcast and I sent me an email. And as soon as I said that, he was just, oh my gosh, flushed face. He's like, I am so sorry. He's like, I was so busy after Celebration. I was swamped with things to do and I completely forgot. He's like, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to ghost you or anything. I mean, just falling over backwards just to apologize for what he did. And it was all just a big misunderstanding. We're like, it's all right, dude. You know, because of that, we decided to start our own podcast and be better.
Until today, it is still a running joke between us.
Oh,
we mention it all the time.
We've been on their show. They've actually had Sam on. They've had all of us on. Their show. We've had Dominic on our show a couple of times. So it's totally cool, and we love those guys over the world.
We do.
They put out a fantastic podcast. If you don't listen to them, you need to check them out. And they've started doing YouTube stuff in the last few months.
Oh, really?
And so check out their YouTube channel as well. On that, it's much better than what we did on YouTube when we started the YouTube channel. With it. But yeah, it was super fun. But then a little while after that, we're standing there and we're just, mingling with it's nuts.
Okay. Well, the thing is Sammy and I weren't mingling. It was already an uncomfortable location for Sammy.
Because it was a bar. It was on the rooftop of a bar.
It was a rooftop
and it was a bunch of people
bar.
A lot
it was
older than us.
a lot older than us, and most of them were already wasted by this point, and it was already 30 minutes in. And Sammy and I are just standing in the corner, and we're like, we don't fit here because, I mean, you walk into the next room, and there's a giant bar and a bunch of liquor and stuff that just, a 13-year-old shouldn't be around.
Right.
So,
and at the time, we didn't really follow, Star Wars YouTube and Star Wars podcasting very much. So we didn't really recognize any of the people. I mean, you were like, oh my gosh, that's so-and-so
absolutely.
the whole time. But we were really just like, these are just a bunch of middle-aged people who are drinking and we don't know them. So,
but then somebody walks in, and as soon as he walks in the room, the P.T. Barnum in me comes out at this moment. It is Matt Martin, another member of Lucasfilm's story group. He works right alongside Pablo Hidalgo, and he and I had interacted some on Twitter, not like direct messaging or anything like that, but had been interacting on Twitter on different posts. He is a gift to Star Wars fandom. And he the things that he puts up with from Star Wars Twitter, and continues to be positive, continues to be kind, continues to interact with fans. He is amazing. And he walked in the room, and I'm like, I nudged both of them, and I'm like, guys, that's Matt Martin from Lucasfilm Story Group. And you guys are kind of like,
okay. I mean,
we're just who?
Story group is cool, but we didn't know who it was.
No.
But like I said, the P.T. Barnum in me starts coming out, and I'm like, here's your chance. And so we had our Make Terbus Canon stickers on. We were all wearing Make Terbus Canon shirts.
Oh, yeah.
Right? With it, I'm like, I take the stickers. I'm like, you guys go over there and you talk to Matt Martin right now. Like that. And you did.
I don't remember how that conversation
I do.
went.
I remember you made just Sammy and I go talk to him.
Yep.
And of course, me not wanting to do that and not having the P.T. Barnum in me, I'm like, I literally said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm like, because I did not want, in the first place, I didn't want to be there.
Right.
Because that's just such an uncomfortable, like, I loved the rest of the day that we were there. Walking around the outside of San Diego Comic-Con was great, but I was dreading the moment of the actual thing we were there for.
Because being in a bar in that environment.
And just all the people, I'm like, this is not going to be a fun time. And then you're like, hey, that person, he's really high in Lucasfilm. Go talk to him. And I was just, I was not going to do that. I didn't want to do that.
You did, though. You both did. You went up and talked to him. So you guys go up. Do you guys remember anything you talked about at the beginning?
No.
Here's what's funny. I'm standing over in the corner. I'm talking with some of the guys from Star Wars Commonwealth and some of the.
You're talking with Steele at that point.
And with Steele Saunders from Steel Wars podcast and things. We're all having this conversation over to the side, and I'm just watching the two of these guys having this conversation with Matt Martin, and it goes on for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, surely they've talked about Terbus the Porg at this point. So I go over at that point. I'm like, okay, they're probably going to just keep talking to him because they don't know how to end a conversation. And he's too nice to end the conversation, and he wants to go and be away from these two kids. So I go over there, introduce myself, and we start going on there. And it becomes very obvious to me that nobody had brought up Terbus yet in the entire conversation. And I'm like, so finally I'm like, well, you guys, you do know we're Tatooine sons. We're, have you heard the story of Terbus the Porg? And he goes, oh yeah, Terbus. I know a little bit about what happened with that and all this other stuff. And so I have this moment where I'm like, is there ever a possibility? That's what I ask him. Is there any chance that this could actually happen? in the future, that Terbus can be officially made canon or recognized by Lucasfilm. And he's very gracious. He literally even took a picture with the two of these guys holding a Make Terbus Canon sticker that I put all over social media that day. But anyway, he says, if it can be worked into a story naturally, I don't see why it would be a problem, is what he says. But it's not a promise, but it's literally that Dumb and Dumber gif for me. So you're telling me there's a chance. That was all it took from me. And that was, like I said, that was the first time we'd had any real conversation with someone from Lucasfilm about Terbus. And it's now the point in this legend of Terbus the Porg where I start believing that this could actually happen at some point for the first time since since Rian Johnson has gone silent at this point. And then a couple of weeks after this is your birthday, BB Nate. Yes. You're turning, I guess, 13.
Yeah, I was 13 at that point.
Turning that 13. And it's August 7th because your birthday is August 8th. And I remember laying in bed in California the night before your birthday. It's late at night. And I'm on Twitter and I'm just thinking, I just wish there was some way I could tell BB Nate tomorrow that this is a possibility. So I put out a tweet and I'm like, all that BB Nate wants for his 13th birthday tomorrow is to know that hashtag Make Terbus Canon has a shot, right? And so I tag Mark Hamill because Mark Hamill's awesome. Why not, right? Not that Mark Hamill has anything to do with Terbus the Porg, but he's Luke Skywalker.
And he interacts with fans on Twitter a lot.
Mark Hamill and Matt Martin and Rian Johnson. And I send the tweet and it's not 60 seconds later. Both Matt Martin and Rian Johnson have liked that tweet. And I'm like, it's going to happen. I know it. It's going to happen. I wake up get Nathan up the next morning. I'm like, I tell him the whole story and I'm like, it's going to happen. And you're like, that's cool. You know, that's it. So that's what goes on. It was a lot of fun. We got to fast forward a little bit with that.
Yeah. Dead silence
again. Yeah. Nothing after that. Mark Hamill doesn't like the tweet, but he didn't understand the tweet probably because it made no sense to him. But anyway, fast forward just a few more months after that to November of 2018. We're getting ready, or actually at this point, to move out of California back to Colorado. And while we were at the one of the last things Matt Martin says to us at the San Diego Comic-Con was he gives us an invitation.
Yeah, he's like, I mean, if you guys are ever in San Francisco and want a tour of Lucasfilm, he's like, I'd be happy to show you guys around anytime. And we're like,
which was already an awesome moment.
Like, wow.
What? We have the open invite to go to Lucasfilm and be toured by one of the top people in Lucasfilm.
At the story group, yeah.
That was just insane in the first place.
So now we're getting ready to move, and it's like 2 weeks before we're leaving California, and the realization hits that we're never going to get closer to San Francisco than we are right now. It may be a 6-hour drive, but we're in California. So I asked Christy, I asked her mom, like, can we try to make this happen? She's like, you got to try. And so I message him. I tell him the dates we're thinking. He tells us what day works for him. And we make the drive up to...
Funny enough, we listened to Dark Disciple for the first time on that drive.
Great. Yeah, it was good.
Great book.
We take him up on his offer to tour this, make that special trip to San Francisco. Nate, what was your favorite part about touring the Lucasfilm headquarters?
Again, just walking around and seeing all of these amazing things from movies that are like our movies, and seeing stuff for Star Wars and George Lucas's poster collection that was being transferred to Lucasfilm during that time. It was crazy. We were walking through halls and we're seeing all of these movie posters, props, all these things that are just insane.
Yeah, and there's Industrial Light and Magic is partly there as well.
It was crazy.
So there's lots from that too.
And we're walking through that and we're seeing all these marquees and stuff and backdrops used in the original movies by Ralph McQuarrie and all that amazing stuff. And we go in and probably one of the coolest parts though was being where they filmed the Star Wars show and in that office and seeing the ball pit and all of that stuff was really cool because we're like
going into the actual studio, taking pictures behind the podium where Andy Gutierrez and Anthony Carboni filmed the show and sitting on the couch.
Exactly, because that was what we were going for with our YouTube show originally. And we're like, okay, we're actually where these people are. And this is what we were striving to do. And of course, we took a different path, but that path got us to be here. And it was really awesome just saying hi to all these people, saying hi to Andy as she was in the fluster of announcing the
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's this moment where like she's rushing by and Matt's like, hey, Andy, these are the guys from Tatooine Sons, the whole Terbus the Porg thing. And she's super nice and kind and shakes our hands and invites us to jump into the ball pit. That was for her birthday by Anthony Carboni on a previous episode of the Star Wars show and all that kind of stuff. We're having all this fun with it.
Yeah.
But she looks flustered, like she's in the middle of something that's going on. Little do we know, we leave there. We'll come back to this in a second, but we leave there and like maybe within 20 minutes. No, it wasn't even that long. Maybe 20 minutes after we leave, Twitter starts blowing up. They announce, Andy Gutierrez announces on video from there the Andor series that's coming out, and she was recording that announcement while we were walking through Lucasfilm headquarters, entering into this. She had just finished recording that announcement. I messaged Matt Martin right away. I'm like, you totally knew that this was happening today and didn't tell us. And he's like, yep. Sam, what was your favorite part about being at Lucasfilm headquarters?
I mean, just the significance and the history of that place. I mean, film history was changed and made in that place. And another cool moment was, we're getting toured and we're looking down these stairs and Matt Martin's like, well, I can't take you down there because there's confidential work happening about new series and stuff. So y'all can't go down there, but that's where it happens. And I was like, no,
it was the animation department.
Right.
And right then they were doing stuff for
Clone Wars season 7. No, it was Clone Wars season 7, I think.
And season 4 of Rebels.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy.
The
stuff.
final episode.
No, because that had already happened.
Season 4 of Rebels already happened.
2018, it happened in the fall.
So they were season 7 of Clone Wars. They were probably Bad Batch.
And Resistance.
And Resistance, yeah.
So, I mean, it was
crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. There was another cool moment where Matt takes us up onto the executive floor. We don't get to go into the executive offices, obviously, but we're on the executive floor in the lobby area. There's a glass case that has props from the films in it. One of the props, and he tells us they put this in here yesterday. Mm-hmm. I don't know. My headcanon is that they put it in there because they knew we were coming.
That's totally not true.
But we've got a picture of BB Nate standing there with
the actual prop for Terbus the Porg, or at least a Porg. But of course, for us, it was Terbus.
It was Terbus the Porg on there. There's actually a really funny story about the moment that we ran into the Holocron Keeper. That's what he calls himself on Twitter. Leland Chi, another one of the leaders within Lucasfilm Story Group. Yeah. Sam, tell that story a little bit.
Yeah, so we're standing there in one of the hallways, and Matt Martin's showing us one of the matte paintings of that Ralph McQuarrie did for the films, where there's a spot emptied out that they filmed through, but everything else is like a background. Brilliant filmmaking technique, and it was amazing. So he's explaining that story to us, and we're looking at this piece of history here. And all of a sudden, this guy walks by, and Matt Martin's like, "Hey, Leland," because they work together, they're buddies. And your P.T. Barnum moment. Just without missing.
No, I know. As soon as he says,
"Why did you say that?" You kind of go, and then you go.
Yeah, I mean, without hesitation, just "Hey, Leland," just like your buddies that went out for drinks the night before or something. And he's like, "Oh, hey,"
He starts shaking my hand like we knew each other. Obviously, he's thinking we've met somewhere before. I just don't remember who this is, but I don't want to make a fool out of myself. So I got to act like I know this guy. So we start this conversation like we're best buddies at this point. Yeah, and then Matt's
like, "Hey, these are the guys with Tatooine Sons. They're the Terbus guys." And he's like, Oh, the Terbus guys. He knows exactly who we are. We're a headache.
He's like, that naming deal. With it.
Licensing deal, I think.
I'm licensing naming something like that. Anyway, it was like a moment where all of the little antennas start going up for me. I'm like, wait a second. If they're having a conversation about some type of a deal internally about Terbus the Porg, this might actually happen at some point.
This was actually early on though in our tour. Like this was like
this was like within just the first 15 minutes or so. So just kind of we have a great time touring Lucasfilm, but that Christmas I can't get this out of my head, whatever this deal thing that he's talking about is. And I'm like, okay, we've got to like take action. on this moment. So we send gifts to Ryan. I send Rian Johnson a mug and stickers to his publicist so that they can get it to him, to Matt Martin and to Leland Chee. And in the letter, and to Leland Chee, I write a letter.
All this is make Terbus Canon stuff, right?
Yeah, I make Terbus Canon stickers and mugs and everything else. In that, I send a letter saying, please understand, we have no desire to have any type of naming rights to this, any royalties, any recognition officially from Lucasfilm or Star Wars or Disney in any way, shape, or form. All we want is freedom to be able to say that we were the ones that came up with the name of Terbus if it ever happens, and we go forward. And then silence.
Nothing.
Yeah. Again, I do get a message from Matt thanking me for the gifts and everything else, but it's nothing going forward all the way to summer of 2019.
Yeah, it was a long time.
This guy's this is a period of time where I don't know how much I've talked to these two about this.
Not much.
But there was significant pushback coming to us on social media during this period of time. Lots of people making fun of Terbus, the Make Terbus Canon hashtag, people saying, give it a rest. It's never going to happen. Stop tweeting about it. Stop putting that hashtag on your posts. You're morons. I mean, literally, we had some pretty negative things.
It's Twitter.
Said to us. It's Twitter and Facebook. I remember, and I pushed back a couple of times. I got pretty angry. There was a point where I was like, we're day 346 of our campaign to make Terbus Canon, and people were like, please God, don't let there be a day 347. That kind of stuff. It was really really ugly. I'm reminded kind of a saying that I've heard, a business saying. It says, first they ignore you, then they make fun of you. After that, they oppose you, and finally they respect you. Right. And that's kind of what it felt like in 2019. In early summer, at this point, my confidence is at the lowest point that it's going to be at this. It seemed kind of our hopes were completely dashed. And we hear about this comic series that's announced. So before The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, there was a publishing push across all of the publishing houses that are associated with Star Wars that they called The Rise to the Force, or the Journey to the Force, the Journey to the Force Awakens, The Journey to the Last Jedi, and then The Journey to the Rise of Skywalker. And they made this big announcement early summer 2019 of The Journey to the Rise of Skywalker. Yeah. And a part of that announcement was that there was going to be a 3-issue comic series arc on Star Wars Adventures telling the story of Chewbacca liberating Kashyyyk from the First Order with his Porg friend. And I'm like, that's it. It's Chewbacca's Porg friend. That's Terbus. It has to be. So I reach out to Matt Martin on DM. I'm like, please tell me that this is what's happening, that it's Terbus the Porg. And he, within just a few minutes, again, he responds and he's like, that's not it. It's not happening. The guy doesn't have any idea about Terbus the Porg. Don't expect anything to come from that. It's not happening. I'm sorry. I mean, it was that clear. And I want to say thank you to Matt for being that blunt at that moment, because I think
that's what we needed.
I needed him to tell me that. If he gave us any hope, I would have continued to push for it. It was kind of discouraging with this. A couple months later, though, I get a DM from Matt Martin, and this is what the DM says. He says, I 100% just made a note about naming a Porg Terbus. It's completely up to the writer, but you should know I'm trying. And I get that tweet.
Again, thank you for trying that.
I know. That's what I think.
There's no point for you to make any effort in doing that, and yet you still did.
Yeah. What was your response? When he said that, I told you the story.
You messaged me on Messenger about it.
And what was your response? What did you send me?
This was right after Endgame came out. So I sent him the GIF of Clint, of course, some huge Hawkeye fan, saying, don't do that. don't give me hope. And it was
So I
really
said
cool.
that to Luke, to Matt, and I'm like, this is what BB Nate just sent me. So,
which was true. And again, it was like, it was a new like shot of like hope. And it was just like, we're sinking. And then we just started to float up again. And it was like, are we ever going to finally sink, or are we just going to be able to sail straight? And it was kind of just like, I hate being in this little position I'm in. Can we move to one side or the other?
yeah.
Finally,
Absolutely.
yeah.
It was about a month after this then. We get another cryptic DM, this time from Matt. And it says, you definitely want to pick up Star Wars Adventures number 27 when it's out. Sam, was this the moment that you finally believed this was going to happen?
I'm not. I think there was even more hope in me, but I was still kind of like, I mean, it's cryptic, it's vague, you know, I needed a 100% no like chance that there's
No
any
wiggle
way.
room at all.
Right. I need to know for a fact that this is happening. I mean, I was still excited. I'm like, maybe we should still definitely pick it up. I mean, he's telling us to, but I was still like, it's not a confirmation, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That issue, Star Wars Adventures 27, was set to release October 31st of 2019. But about a week before that, I'm at work, and I'm training. I'm a sales trainer, and I'm training a class of brand new salespeople. And we're doing some intense like role. I think we're actually it was a call center, so we were on the phones for the first time. I think it was our first day on the phones.
So it's a big day.
It's a big day. They're like, and that means my job is the hardest that day because I'm helping them figure out how to do things technically. I'm helping to coach them on calls, all of these different types of things. And then suddenly my phone in my pocket just starts buzzing over and over and over again. And it's these Twitter DMs that are coming nonstop at this point. And finally I open up my phone and I pull it open, and the first one that I look at is someone saying, have you seen what StarWars.com just released? And they linked to it. And it came out a week before. So I think it's the 24th of October. And it says, or 23rd or something like that of October. And it's the preview of Star Wars Adventures 27.
Right.
With it. And it talks about the story of, Chewbacca and Nine Numb and Chewbacca's Porg friend Terbus liberating on StarWars.com. Terbus the Porg is named as part of this. BB Nate, you were actually dog sitting.
I was.
When this was going on. And when I picked my jaw up off the ground that this had happened, I gave you a call to explain it. What was your reaction?
Well, okay, I got to explain this. I don't get excited about anything. Like, I don't show emotions all that much, and especially with excitement, I just don't see a reason of jumping up and down and super excited. So when you called me and you told me about it, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Great.
That's about as much excitement as he can muster.
I'm excited that happened. That's really awesome. I can't believe it finally happened. And that was about it. Now, it's not fun having me as a son because y'all do all this like special stuff and have this stuff happen. And I'm just like, well, that's cool. Great.
No, I could tell you genuinely are grateful for these opportunities and these things. And I know you were in that moment. But it is funny because it's totally your personality at that point. Sam, what was your thoughts when you finally saw
you were
that
actually
article?
freaking out, though.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't believe that it was happening. I mean, this was months and months and months in the making. And I think I was just more excited for you, Nate, because like this was your question and we've been fighting for it for so long. I mean, I wasn't as, in the fight as you were, Dad, but I was still really pushing for it. I really wanted this to happen. And now I knew for a fact that this was happening. And I was probably at school or something. And I was like telling everybody I could.
Showing them the article and stuff. Yeah.
Cause I'm sure I told the story to people before, but said, it's not canon. We're, trying. And then I'm like, look guys, it's happening. And they were all excited about it too.
Dad, what was your reaction? Cause you were at work.
I stood there. I think I stood there for 10 minutes and just didn't know what to do. I just kept reading the article over and
Just to
over
make sure you weren't
again.
hallucinating?
Yeah, and then seeing and then the DMs were coming through. I think the first thing that I did was I did reach out to Matt Martin, and I thanked him for this. And of course I the PT Barnum in me, the first thing I did after that was I tweeted out the article and I put it out on Facebook, and I made a big deal out of it because it's a big freaking deal. And that's when the hashtag Terbus is canon became a part of our Twitter and social media lexicon going forward on that. I responded once I kind of got my bearings a little bit after talking or mentioning it to you guys and making sure you guys knew about it and Mom knew about it and everybody else that I could think of that I wanted to talk to about it knew about it. I then was responding to the messages and thanking everybody for sending it and thanking the people that were congratulating us with it. But I think it didn't really set in, honestly, at that. I mean, I think it obviously I believed it. I knew it was going to happen. You don't see it show up on StarWars.com unless it's legitimately going to happen. But then it was a week later when we did that live broadcast from that comic book store for the release of that. We had coordinated all that. And I'm standing there in the comic book store and I'm holding Star Wars Adventures issue 27 in my hands. We got it up on the wall. We got 27, 28, and 29 on the wall right here in the studio here. And I'm looking it open and I'm seeing that Snaps Wexley has sort of adopted one of the Porgs as his friend, and he's named it Terbus. So that's the canon answer for what the name of that Porg is. So Snaps Wexley has named it, and now he's on this adventure with Chewbacca again. And I'm reading this stuff, and it was just like, I can't believe that this really happened. I mean, is this real? And so. It was amazing. We spent like the last hour plus now walking through this story again, all the way from start to finish. I want to get your guys' feedback. How do you feel about the legend of Terbus the Porg now? I'll start with you, Sam.
It's hard to put into words. I mean, it's something that you can't believe happened. Like, it is something out of a story, like a book. I mean, it is every fan's dream that you always think, well, it'll never happen to me. And then somehow it did. Like, I still can't believe how it happened or why it happened. I mean, we're truly blessed to be able to have the experiences we've had as a result of that, but also that happening in and of itself. I mean, it's just, we have cemented, our love of Star Wars has in a very small way changed Star Wars history. We have impacted a part of Star Wars history, and that is incredible. And what's even, this was kind of like a little selfish reason to me that I'm happy it happened. But in a way, it has immortalized our dog, Buster, in Star Wars, something we love. His name will live on forever in Star Wars. Nobody else can say that. I mean, no fan.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's cool because eventually he's not going to be here and it's going to be sad, but I can look up at Star Wars issue 27 and remember that happened because of Buster in a way. It's incredible. All the stars that aligned, or not stars, but the events that lined up perfectly, one after another, for this whole story to happen is incredible.
Maybe Nate.
Yeah, it's crazy because it doesn't seem like something that someone would ever consider even as a possibility. And we didn't even consider it as a possibility. We're like, that would be fun if it happened. That would be weird, crazy, but that's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And so it was something that was just really just something fun to think of. And then it turned into so much more. It turned into this. It
was a gag for the longest time. I mean, the whole Make Terbus Canon thing, there was a point where we didn't really believe it was going to happen. No. Let's just be honest.
It was just our shtick.
It was our shtick. It was our little thing that we did, and we were known as the Make Terbus Canon guys. And that was fine. Yeah. We had gotten to see The Last Jedi with Rian Johnson and ask him questions and do all these things.
There was this fun moment at Celebration 2019.
Yeah, Chicago.
We had actually we'd met. We run across Matt Martin on the show floor. And we were talking to him, and of course,
this is hilarious.
This is hilarious.
We had a poster. You had a poster tube on your back because Celebration. They give you all sorts of posters. It's awesome. We got them all up in our room.
Yeah, most of them are from that.
What we did is we put a whole bunch of Make Terbus Canon stickers on it because we still they're somewhere, or I don't know if we threw them away. Thousands of those stickers.
That's so many.
So we're just slapping them on everything, right? And we're talking with Matt, and this, I don't remember who it is.
Yeah, some lady.
Some lady comes up and she's like, where did you get those Make Terbus Canon stickers? She's like, those are awesome. And we're like,
No,
we weren't.
Oh, yeah.
Matt says, these are the Terbus guys. This is Tatooine Sons. And she knew about the show. She knew about the Make Terbus Canon thing, and she wanted stickers. She didn't know that we were the people. She was freaking out, wanting to take pictures with us. And meanwhile, I don't know if you guys realize this, but the other person that was with Matt at that time was one of the artists that does the other storyline that drew the other storyline in the Star Wars Adventures comics that's parallel with that's in those same issues. The C-3PO and R2-D2 stories. He's the artist that drew those.
I didn't know that.
With that. Yeah, it's been nuts. So it's hard to believe we get to be a part of this and to say that these things happened. What an amazing experience.
Definitely.
And it didn't happen because we pushed this to happen or because coincidence and stuff. It happened because everything came together in the right way to make that happen. And so when we start every episode with this statement that we believe that, these types of, there's a story written on our souls, that's because we believe that there's a God writing that story and he orchestrates things. And so all of this, it happened because I don't know why God thought that was a cool thing to do, but man, we can't.
It changed our lives.
It did in more ways than one.
In
so many different ways, this has impacted our lives. And so that's, it's a pretty awesome story to tell. I'm so excited we get to tell it again.
Yes.
Earlier, I made the statement that we were lucky because Nate and Sam's preparation that went and met that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity when Ryan asked Nate what he thought that Porg's name was. But in reality, we don't believe in luck. We believe that there is a God in heaven who loves us. He gave us this opportunity as a blessing. And everything that's happened in the 4 years since this are because he really does care about us, and he's blessed us as we've tried to be faithful to him in the way that we've used this podcast and this platform that he's given us as a way to bring joy and a positive voice to the fandoms that we love. When we look back on the legend of Terbus the Porg, all we can really truly say is thank you. And thank you for listening to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. If you enjoyed this retelling of this legend, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice. Make sure you hit that follow and subscribe button on your app so that you get every episode the moment it drops. Our next episode releases on Tuesday. Let's make the specific topics we'll cover a surprise because with no new Star Wars or Marvel shows being released, it's going to be a bit of a surprise for us too right now. Make sure you follow the show so you don't miss any of these episodes. While you're at it, follow the show on Tatooine, follow Tatooine Sons. You know what I'm talking about. On Facebook and Twitter, share this episode with somebody else. That's how you help this show grow. Please share this story. If you think it's fun to listen to, we'd love for you to do that. That's going to do it for today. There's only one thing left to say.
May the Force be with you, always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Joy, please.
Yep, yep.